this episode, I'm going to put water-based acrylics into a direct side-by-side comparison with enamel with 2K clear. Stick around right after the intro and I'll tell you all about it. Hello and thank you for tuning in to Model Car Building and Retirement. My name is Ken. In this episode, I'm going to do a direct side-by-side demonstration and comparison of water-based acrylics compared to enamel with 2K clear. As some of you may know, the 2K clear and enamel is my go-to paint. I get consistent shiny results every time, but I wanted to try the water-based acrylics because it's much more environmentally friendly, a lot less fumes, and a lot of requests for me to demonstrate this. So I'm going to show you the direct side-by-side demonstration of mixing the paints and spraying, and stick around to the end. You might be surprised with the results. I did shorten the enamel paint job a little bit because that is also covered in my 4-part series on how you can get a custom show car finish on your model car, parts 1 through 4. Be sure to watch that. In this episode, I'm going to put a water-based acrylic in a direct test against an enamel with a 2K clear. On the water-based side, we're going to be using Createx Airbrush Colors Opaque Red with a top coat of their 4053 high gloss water-based acrylic clear. On the enamel side, I'm going to use MCW Finishes Bright Red Enamel top coated with their 2K gloss clear enamel. To aid in the adhesion of both paints, I prepared the body by sanding lightly with Trizact 5000, followed by washing with Dawn dishwashing soap, just to make sure that there's no mold release compounds or anything else left on the body, giving both paints an equal chance to adhere properly to the model. And once again, to make the test as fair as possible, both the acrylic and the enamels are going to be used with primers and reducers and clears that are recommended to go along with each product line. On the water-based side, we're going to start with Vallejo water-based primer. This is a light gray number 74601, and that is a ready-to-spray primer. It does not need any reducers whatsoever. After the primer has been allowed to cure at least 12 hours, we're going to be top coating with Createx Airbrush Colors Opaque Red, reduced with their number 4011 reducer, which is a water-based reducer. I will have the mixtures later on in the video. And finally, after the color has been allowed to cure, I am going to top coat with their high gloss clear number 4053, reduced with their number 4011 reducer. On the enamel side of the car, we're going to start out with MCW Finishes number 1004 light gray lacquer primer. This is a ready to spray right out of the bottle. For the enamel color, it'll be MCW Finishes bright red enamel, and that's going to be reduced with Mr. Leveling Thinner and a little bit of the MCW enamel hardener number 1003E, and I will have these ratios later in the video. And then finally, on the enamel side for the 2K clear, we're going to be using number 1011E of the MCW Finishes gloss clear enamel. That's going to also be reduced with Mr. Color Leveling Thinner, and also going to have a clear hardener number 1017EH. So the choices of product I use for either the acrylic enamel side or the enamel side are products that I've used previously with success. So I'm sure you can substitute some of these out, however your results may vary. I am not sponsored by any of the products that you see on the screen. This is just what I use for the test. Okay, so we're at the spray booth and I have half the car masked off because I don't want to contaminate the other side with any of the products that we're going to be using. I'm using Frog painter's tape. My understanding is it's very similar to the Tamiya tape, but a lot cheaper, so I've not had any issues with it. It kind of has a light tack to it, so it doesn't really want to pull the paint up. It's a pretty good stuff, and it edges very well. I've used it many times. Gonna start with the enamel side first, on the driver's side, and my reason for that is the enamels have the hardeners mixed in with it, so I know that I can speed up my cure time and tape off to begin the acrylic test. Whereas if I did the acrylic first, I'd have to just wait longer before that to cure. MCW light gray primer 1004 ready to spray. I'll be going 0.3 millimeter needle, 18 to 20 psi, and I'm going to be applying 2 wet coats. let's get to spraying. Gonna get a little bit of light coat on the bottom edges here first. Hard to get areas. I'm watching my reflection in the lights above, overlapping my passes about 50%. I glued that hood on, by the way, for the sake of this video. Okay, so that first coat was a little bit more on a medium to wet coat. I'm gonna go wetter on my second coat, and no waiting. Gonna go right into it, just get some more paint in my brush. Okay, full on wet coat. And the reason for the lacquer primer is just to get good adhesion and prepare that model to be accustomed to some solvents, because solvents are used in lacquers and enamels. Okay, that's 2 wet coats. We're going to let that set up for about 12 hours. Alright, so now it's time to mix up the enamel paint. So MCW finishes, we're going to go with the bright red. And they call for a mixture of 8 parts paint to 1 part hardener to 2 parts thinner. But I found a ratio of 1:1 thinner to paint works best, and then of that mixture, 10% would be the hardener. So what I've done is I'm going to mix up 10 milliliters in my little measuring cup here. That's more than adequate for half the body. So I put 2 little marks here. I'm going to fill the first mark to 5 milliliters of thinner, and then I'm going to add the paint to the second mark, and then I'm going to just put 10% of the mixture, 0.1 milliliter of hardener into that. So let's get the mixing. Draw out the thinner. The ratio doesn't have to be exact, but half and half is pretty good for me. I mixed up the paint really well. Add that into our cup. And then I have some hardener in a different bottle here that I'm going to use up first, because once you open this hardener, it has a diminished shelf life. So the pipette has graduated mixtures on it too. So 1 milliliter is about to this mark here on the pipette, so I'm going to draw some out. Add that to my mixture. Stir that up really good, and we'll be right back. Okay, so my color's been all mixed, and I filled my airbrush up with it. The plan now is to spray with a 0.3 millimeter needle and tip, 18 to 20 psi pressure, and I'm going to do 2 light to medium coats of color followed by 2 wet coats of color. And this is all going to be done in one session, no drying in between, maybe a little bit of flash time up to a minute or 2. So let's get started. Okay, so I used my anti-static brush and wiped my body down real good to make sure there was no dust on it. And I'm just using my air gun, air only, to blow off one last time to make sure there's no dust. Okay, now we're going to start at the bottom and get some tough to get edges very lightly first. Just get a little color build up down there. Okay, I'm going to do my first light to medium coat of paint. This is just to get the color build up. I also hit the gaps lightly first, trunk gaps. And just a nice light coat, overlapping about 50%. This is just to get the color build up, because if you go too wet, you're going to be running and the paint is going to want to pull. Okay, and now I'm going to go into a little bit wetter coat, medium coat. very carefully watching that paint go on, and I'm looking at the reflection in the lights above. Okay, now we are going to go with our first full wet coat. Leave the air on at all times. I'm looking at that reflection in the lights. Looking for a nice pretty shine. It's mixed on a little thin, so I can tell that I need to speed up my speed a little bit. Nothing wrong with that, you just got to adjust. Alright, that is the first wet coat. I'm going to wait 1 to 2 minutes for that to set up. You don't have to wait for it to dry. So we're going to wait a minute or two and we'll be right back. So now it's only tacked up for about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes tops. I'm going to go with my second wet coat. Nice wet coat. See that reflection going on in the lights? I see some dry spots. So I decided I'm just going to get one more blast of wet on there. Okay, very nice wet coat. Alright, now because I had the hardener in there, I can let that go about 8 to 10 hours to cure before I can lightly sand and top coat with clear. But to be very safe, I'm going to go overnight and let that cure up. So we'll be back in the morning. Alright, so it's been about 24 hours since I put the color on the car. And, you know, typical enamel from MCW, it's got a pretty nice shine to it. I didn't lay that paint on super wet to get a brilliant shine because at this point it doesn't matter since I go with the clear coat. So at this point we're just going to do a little bit of sanding to get rid of any dust. I see a little speck on the hood there, or roof. And I also tried a little experiment for my learning curve anyways, maybe yours too. But I had forgot to sand down a mold line right here on the corner of the roof there. So I decided after the fact to sand that down and then go back to the booth and just blow in a little bit of color. And I wanted to see what happens after I do that and do the sanding and clear, how noticeable that'll be. I think it's going to be noticeable, but we're going to get the sanding here and get it ready for clear coat. Just a moment. All right, so I'm using my old trusty Trizact 5000, and that should be the only grit I need to prep this for a clear coat. Just very lightly rubbing back and forth. I have that little speck of dust. I just want to bring that down a little bit. So you just kind of go back and forth a little bit, and then to inspect your work, you just take a paper towel. Okay, so it's dulling up nice. I got rid of that dust. All right, we're going to work on that little spot here where I had dusted in some paint and just lightly wet sand there. Now, if you don't have any blemishes, if you don't have dust and you don't have runs and you don't have horrible orange peel or anything of that nature, you don't really need to sand before you go to clear coat. I'm just giving it a light sand because I had A, the dust on the roof, and 2, I blended in that paint a little bit. Okay, we're just going to get this wiped down, dried off, and we'll be going to clear coat here in just a minute. Okay, so the body is all prepped and taped back off for 2 coats of clear on the enamel side. So this is 2K clear. The mixture ratio on this is 2 parts clear to 1 part clear hardener and 1 part thinner with Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. So I made 3 little marks on my cup here. The first one is at 5 milliliters, so that will be thinner. The second one is at 7.5 milliliters. That will be the clear paint added. And then the third one is at 10 milliliters, and that will be the hardener added. So we're going to use just 1 cup to mix it all. I have 2 pipettes because once you touch anything in that hardener, you want to make sure you don't cross-contaminate it all. Also, I decaled the car, so we're going to test both paints on how they cover decals. But this one says enamel plus 2K clear, and the other side, once it's painted, we'll have a decal saying water-based acrylic. All right, let's. Alrighty, so we've got our thinner. And this is going to be more clear than we need, but it's just an easy set of measurements. And finally, to take it up from 7.5 to the 10 milliliters is the clear hardener number 1017EH. It is one of the things I really like about the hardener, though, is it's very durable. I do know that the water-based is, you know, even though we're going to cover that in clear, it's not going to be as hard and durable. But we'll see how she goes. Now stir that up and we'll meet you at the booth. Alright, so our plan is to go 2 nice wet coats, 0.3 millimeter needle and tip at about 18 to 20 psi, which is pretty much my standard air pressure. But I am going to start off getting some of the bottom edges. So I'm only going very lightly, quarter throttle or so down here. Okay, 2 medium wet coats. As long as I've got a real nice gloss here, that's what I'm going for. You can tell my paint is a little bit on the thin side, so I'm going a little faster and cutting back on my throttle a little bit. Okay, really nice wet coat. Nice and glossy. Gonna let that sit for about a minute or 2. Then it'll come back. Alright, we're gonna go with our second wet coat. I'll tell you, I'm rooting for the acrylic, water-based acrylic, but I don't know. Look at that shine. So that homemade decal on the top is the first time I ever did a homemade decal. So that's got 3 coats of an acrylic spray out of a can onto that decal out of an inkjet printer. I think if you wanted to bury your decals in clear with the 2K, you would have to probably do the 2 wet coats like we did today. Let this cure, sand it down, 2 more wet coats, let it cure, probably sand it down, and you might have to go 2 more coats. But then you also lose a lot of definition in the rest of your details, such as your vents and your marker lights and stuff. But that's 2 wet coats. That is it. We're going to let that all cure out. And then we're going to be going with the water-based acrylic. All right, so it's been overnight, so the clear coat has had a chance to cure. Look at that finish. I mean, that is so sweet and glossy. I mean, it really doesn't even need polishing. One speck of dust in the roof there. Now, I told you when I started my channel that I would share any mistakes that I make and how we overcome them. So I did make a minor mistake, and I don't know if you caught it when I was mixing my clear ratio, but I told you the requirement was 2 parts clear to 1 part hardener and 1 part thinner. But if you watched me when I was filling my cup up, I actually went 1 part clear, 1 part hardener, and 2 parts thinner. But so what that did is it was an extra diluted and reduced mixture, but look how that sprayed. I mean, it's 100% fine. It's a happy accident because I have almost no orange peel whatsoever. But when I made comment that it didn't 100% bury the decal, it probably has a little something to do with the fact that I didn't use 2 parts of the clear. Okay, so for the first step on the acrylics side of the paint job, we're going to use Vallejo primer. This is a gray number 74.601, and we're going to apply a couple wet or light coats to the body. Supposedly use as is without any thinning required. I'm using a 0.5 millimeter nozzle and 18 to 20 psi. Get my hard to reach areas here first. Kind of hard to see going on. Okay, that's the first light coat. I'm going to wait about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay, a second light coat. It sprays on so much differently than the lacquer primer. I'm overlapping about 50% on my passes. Okay, so that is 2 light coats of primer. I think I'm going to stop there and let that all settle down and smooth out. We'll be back. All right, so the Vallejo primer has had about an hour to dry. They call it gray, but really quite white in my opinion. But it's very smooth. There doesn't appear to be any need to do any sanding. I don't have any dust in the paint. It's not bumpy textured or anything. So dried it a touch. Been about an hour. In low humidity condition, it's ready to top coat. So we're going to mix up the acrylic water-based paint now. A lot trickier than your enamels for sure, because these bottles of paint, even though this is called an airbrush color, they vary in thickness quite a bit. Now they'll say at Createx to reduce with the 4011 thinner at least 10%, up to 20. I found that a starting point is probably closer to 30%. There's just a fine line between where it'll spray out of your airbrush and it won't. I'll be using a 0.5 millimeter needle and tip, and I'll be spraying about 18 to 20 psi. All right, so we're going to get the mixing here. Okay, so I pre-marked my little mixing cup here. I got these on Amazon here. So what I did is I marked a 7.5 milliliter that I'm going to fill with the paint, and then 25 to 30% of the 4011 reducer would bring me up to 10 milliliters. So I marked that too. So first I'll add the paint and then I'll add the thinner. We'll mix it up. And you know, we may have to adjust this depending on how it sprays out of the gun. So first you stir the paint up really good, which I've already done. I'm going to fill that up to the 7.5 milliliter mark. Now on your enamel paints, it's a lot easier because normally it's like a 50% one-to-one reducer, and the consistency is nearly like water. But on your water-based paints, the acrylics, water-based acrylics, you cannot thin it to a water consistency. It just won't spray right. So it's a fine line between being able to spray out of your gun, and then it's also a fine line on how far you can dilute it before it doesn't spray correctly at all. All right, so I have my 7.5 milliliters of paint. I'm adding 4011 to bring my level up to the 10. And I see I was just slightly over the 7.5. So I'm going to bring my dilution up there a little bit too. Okay, I'm going to stir this really, really well. For me, it comes down to how well it sprays. So what you want to do is you want to have that reducer right at your booth with your gun, because if you have to dilute it a little bit, you can dilute it on the fly. In my opinion, it's probably a little too thick yet. Just from experience, I can tell that's just too thick to spray out of the gun real well. So I'm going to dilute that more. I'm probably going to be taking this up to about a 40% reduction. Just eyeballing it. So I started with 7.5 milliliter of paint, but I was a little bit above the line. And now I'm about 10, I'm probably about 11 milliliters with the thinner included. Now Createx recommends that you let this mixture set for about 10 minutes before you spray to allow it to acclimate to the reducer. So we'll go the full 10 minutes and I'll be back at the booth and we'll give it a try. One other thing I forgot to mention that I feel is very important, especially when you're spraying out of the bottle, because you may have a little bit of dried paint at the very tip of your bottle. So to roll out any debris in your paint, I recommend straining it. So this is just an old, I don't even know what mesh this is, but it's an old standard paint strainer. I've had it for years, so I can't even tell you what degree of mesh that is, but it works for me. I've not had any problem when I've diluted things through here. Okay, so we're going to finish that 10-minute setting period, and then I'll meet you at the booth. Okay, so we're at the spray booth with the acrylic color all mixed up, about a 25 to 30% reduction with the 4011 reducer. There's two ways to test your gun before you just start spraying your model. I like to use these little spoons here, and this one was primered with the same primer as the model. And I'm going to go light to medium coat. And it's spraying out of the gun really good. Really good. The secondary way to test it is you could try it on a piece of paper. And that's a very light dusting right there. If I go full bore, that's what it would look like. So in my opinion, the gun is working pretty good with that mixture, so we'll get to on the model now. Okay, so once again, it's a 0.5 needle, 18 to 20 psi, and I'm gonna apply light coats, especially to begin with. I'm aiming right here at the bottom edges, and I'm spraying about a quarter throttle. It's covering really nice. I'm gonna hit my little gaps here lightly first, just like I do with my enamel paint. All right, now I'm going to get into my first light coat. I'm going to say it's between light to medium. The idea here is to just get color on, not going for finish or anything like that. Overlaps about 50%. I'm keeping my air on at all times and only turning my paint on and off as I need to. Because if you abruptly stop both at the same time, it will spurt out right on your model. So that was sprayed on so dry that I can immediately go into my second coat. And this time I'm going to go toward a medium coat. Overlapping 50%. I'm watching that paint just go right onto the body. It doesn't go on as smoothly as the enamel. We'll see if it levels out. Okay, so that is the first medium wet coat. I'm going to let that sit for about 10 minutes. Now with the enamel, you can normally get your second coat on within a minute or so. But with the water-based, you do have to let that set up and dry a little bit. Right now the texture looks extremely orange-peeled. And it may be because I sprayed it too dry. I'm going to let that sit for 10 minutes and we'll be back. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes since I put my first light to medium coat of red on there, of acrylic. It leveled out amazing. I mean, when I left you just a minute ago, or 10 minutes ago, it was heavily orange peeled. I was very worried about it, but it's flattened out and leveled out extremely well. And it dries flat color, so almost like a base coat to a base coat clear coat car of today. All right, we're going to do another medium wet coat. Probably could have used my 0.3 millimeter because it's spraying quite wet. All right, so that was one very light coat and then two medium to wet coats, and let that set up for 10 minutes. All right, so it's been about maybe 15-20 minutes after my second medium to wet coat. Everything looks really good. At this point, all you're looking for is to make sure you don't have any mist or light colored spots. You're looking for uniform color, and you're looking for a nice flat appearance with no dust or heavy orange peel or anything. And none of that exists. We've got a nice uniform color. Now it's hard to picture the finished color at this stage because when you got this dry matte appearance, it's going to look totally different once you get your clear on. So I would say the color coat went on very successfully, not difficult at all, just different than the enamel the way it goes on. Now we're going to let this set up overnight, and then we're going to use the water-based acrylic 4053 Createx high gloss clear. Now if you really wanted to, you can use 2K clear or even my enamel 2K clear, but that defeats the purpose. You know, the reason we're doing acrylic is to reduce the fumes or whatnot. So we're going to come back tomorrow and we'll look at this. So it's been about 6 hours since I put that last coat of color on the car, and I was going to wait till the next day, but Createx actually says that you can top coat at 5 hours, so it's been 6, and it's still early enough in the day, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So the paint dries to a nice, I'm going to call it a satin finish. The color is uniform, that's the most important part, and I don't see any flaws that need sanded or anything. If I did have to sand this, I probably would have waited longer to let it cure more. Now I did put my other homemade decal on the roof showing that it's a water-based acrylic side, and I see that it sort of has like a silvering, so I don't think that's going to clear over very good. And I think the mistake I made is I probably should have given it a mid-coat of clear before I put a decal on there, and then clear again after. But disregard the appearance of the decal because that's not what we're shooting for. We're going to be talking about paint finish here. So we're going to get right into mixing the clear. So I'm using Kreg 4053 High Gloss. They recommend for an airbrush to have up to a 30% dilution with the 4011 reducer. So I've marked my little cup just like I did on the color coat. So I marked 7.5 milliliters for the clear. And then by the time you add 30%, it's just shy of 10 milliliters. So I'm going to take it just up to the 10 milliliter line with the thinner. And we're going to stir that up. Now you can squirt these in, but I'm always afraid I'm going to get something dried from the cap of the stuff. So I'm going to use a pipette. You can see how thick that clear is. It's pretty thick. In fact, it's so thick that the pipette really won't pick it up, so we're going to squirt it in there after all. Yeah, that's working better. So I'm just going to take that up to the 7.5 line, right about there. And now I'm going to take it up to the 10 milliliter line, which is about 30% with the 4011 reducer. Easier out of your gun. All right, so I'm going to stir this up real good. Find my stirring stick here. And just like the color coat, they recommend letting that sit for about 10 minutes before you spray to acclimate to the reducer. So I'll meet you at the spray booth in 10 minutes, which will just be an instant in your time. All right, so we're at the spray booth. Now notice that the clear is a milky substance, and of course it's going to dry clear. Acrylics recommends that you spray coats medium to wet, where you're getting a shine as you spray, but yet not so loaded up that it turns cloudy and milky on you. So there's that fine line there. So we're going to try that, and we're going to go once again a 0.5 millimeter needle and nozzle, 18 to 20 psi, and we're going to give it medium to wet coats without getting too wet. Let's give it a whirl. Overlap about 50%, pretty much like normal. My throttle is probably only about 3/4 throttle, so that I'm not laying it on too freaking wet. I would say my first coat was a little bit more on the shy side. It was probably light to medium. I'm going to give this 10 minutes to flash up, and my next coat will be just slightly wetter. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, coat number 2. Gonna try to get a little bit wetter. A little bit thick, so I'm having to go kind of slow. Barely getting the milky look, so I think I'm okay. I want it a little bit thick because we are going to want to sand and polish. I've gotten so used to spraying the enamel that this goes on a lot different. It goes on very textured, I guess. Not going on quite as wet, but I have found that it levels itself out pretty good. So I'm breaking from my tradition here. Just getting a little wetter. Not the way I would spray my enamel. That would be 2 wet coats rather quickly on my speed. And here I'm going much slower and trying to get it a little wetter. Alright, I'm going to stop right here, give it 10 minutes and see what we look like. So we're slowly building up clear and gloss onto the car. The side looks better than the top because the top, it kind of just flattens out and levels out to almost a semi-gloss again. But that was only 2 coats. Let's go with the third. I added a few more drops of 4011 thinner just to lighten that up a little bit so I can spray a little bit wetter. Here's coat number 3. Feels a little bit better out of the gun this way. It's spraying wetter. I prefer that a little bit better. I'm seeing it cloud up just a little bit, but I'm staying shy of excessive here. Give it 10 more minutes and see what she looks like. Okay, the side is glossing up really nice. The top just keeps leveling out to a semi-gloss finish. And from experience, I know that that's going to be difficult to sand down and polish. So I'm going to go onward to another coat yet. Slowing my pace down, going just a little bit heavier. You do run the risk of runs this way, but I can tell it needs a little bit heavier coats. All right, approaching that milky area there, so we're gonna stop. 10-15 more minutes, we'll see what happens. Be right back. Alrighty, I'll tell you what, she's glossing up really nice on the side here. Once again, the top side just that little bit of flattening out on me. I'm gonna go with one more coat. Let's see how she goes. Gotta really watch how she's laying on. It goes much more of a slower motion than it does with the enamels. I'm used to going fast, so I'm having to really gear myself down here. And that's only because it's spraying thicker. I think the trick I'm finding is you have to leave it in a wet state. If you have dry spray, it affects the outcome. All right, I don't dare do any more, so we're gonna stop there. I'm gonna give it about an hour, and I'm gonna pull my tape, and then I'm gonna give it... Okay, so it's been 3 days since I sprayed the water-based acrylic, and that was the 4053 Createx Clear over the red. You know, I'm actually, I'm happy with it for an acrylic water base. I think it's got a nice shine to it. I wouldn't say it's quite as glossy as what you get right out of the booth with the 2K Clear. So this is the water-based acrylic side, the darker red. And this lighter red is the enamel with the 2K Clear. And you could just tell that the gloss is much higher here. But all in all, not bad. Not bad, especially if you just cannot spray the solvent-based stuff in your house. But, all right, so we're going to very carefully try to get this polished up a little bit. I'm a little bit dry sprayed on the trunk, just a little bit of dust. Now, so my approach to sanding and polishing a water-based acrylic is much different than it would be on the enamel. The enamel is just super hard, and you can get right into it. So my approach on water-based acrylic is to start with my lightest, least aggressive approach first. And if that doesn't work, I'll back up one step and go a little bit to something a little more severe. If this didn't have any dust on it, I would probably just try my polish alone without any sanding. But I do have a pretty good dust narb here, so I'm going to wet some 8/1000 grit paper, wet that quarter a little bit, and I'm only very lightly. I'm not pushing down. Just very lightly sanding that big old dust narb out of the way. Not aggressive at all. No downward pressure, really. And the trick is not to let this thing get too wet and stay too wet. Alright, I'm going to check my work with a paper towel here. And I'm wiping up all my water. I don't know if you could see it, but the water is staining the paint. Just for that little bit of water exposure it had. No, I'm not going to do all this on camera. I'm just going to very carefully with 8/1000ths, very delicately hit any bumps of dust, and then I'll come back. So even though I'm barely sanding and wiping my water away as quickly as possible, you can see that every time it gets wet, it leaves like a stain in the paint that'll eventually evaporate away. So you got to just be so very careful not to let that water stay. All right, so I have gone over my rough spots with 8/1000. I'm going to go to 12/1000ths, and then I'll be right back. So I'm just going one panel at a time, wetting it down with my finger a little bit, and then hitting it with that 12/1000ths ever so lightly. I have almost like no finger pressure on this at all. I don't know if you can see it, but like there's streaks on this door just from where the water has run. It does dissipate as it dries a little bit. And, you know, maybe if you wait 10 days or so, it gets better. It's been 3. According to Createx, it doesn't need to be that long. I believe they said 8 hours. So it's been 3 days. Sorry if I'm out of frame, folks. But what you see is as you're wet sanding, it kind of turns milky wet again, which is the way it looks when you're spraying the clear on, because that has a milky consistency. So you can tell that you're sanding it away and you're reactivating that clear a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep sanding and I'll be back. All right, so all the sanding is complete. As I was saying, it kind of reactivates that clear, so just be very careful and take a towel and dry and kind of buff with a dry towel, and then let that model sit for a couple minutes, and that the little streaks and marks from the water will dissipate. It's almost like the clear is re-drying. So just be careful not to get it too soaked. I would honestly say that if you can avoid sanding at all is your best bet. You know, I did have a little bit of dust, which forced me to, you know, I didn't want to live with that dust. I'm looking for a show car finish. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to go to polishing now. And I did a little test spot on the car with my Scratch X from Meguiar's, which is a little bit more of a compound, just way too aggressive for the car. So I am just going to polish with Ultimate Polish Gloss Enhancer. Has almost like no grit to it at all, no abrasive. I'm just going to carefully, lightly rub that in. Just rubbing very lightly. And I'm going to just keep rubbing until that compound like disappears on me. And once again, anything wet on this paint, the paint does not like to get wet with anything, including the polish. So what we're going to do here is we will polish until it pretty much breaks down, but we're not going to buff it away. We're going to let this all haze up. I think between this and perhaps a little coat of wax at the end is all we're gonna need. All right, I'm gonna keep on polishing just as you see here, and I'll be back. All right, so we have the water-based acrylic all polished out the best I can get it. So I got it on a 360 table with some lighting to try to get that reflection the best I can as she spins around. I'm gonna let you be the judge. The light color is the enamel with the 2K clear, and the darker red is the water-based acrylic with water-based clear from Createx. I'm going to give you the pros and cons on both and let you be the judge there. So first on the enamel and the 2K clear, the pros is it's an outstanding finish every time and very consistent. You know, 2 medium coats of color, 2 wet coats of color, you're done. When you go to clear, 2 wet coats of clear, you're done. Brilliant gloss. It's hard, it's durable, sands really well, and in my opinion, show car quality. The cons for the enamel with the 2K clear is it emits quite a bit of fumes. So if you don't have a place that's well ventilated and safe, you are going to stink up the house. So that's definitely a con. And in my opinion, it's the only con. All right, now as far as the water-based acrylics, pros and cons. You can spray this in the house with almost no fumes. So there's a pro. You can get a pretty nice finish. It takes a lot more work, but I wouldn't be ashamed of that paint job. It's just not show quality, perhaps factory look to me. The cons, quite a bit of cons on the water-based acrylics. First of all, a very, very lengthy process. It took 5 coats of clear to get enough buildup to be able to get a nice finish on there. And you have to wait 10 to 15 minutes between each and every coat for that to dry and set up before you can continue on. Therefore, it makes your session of painting probably closer to, it's an hour, 5 coats. Your results may vary, maybe better, maybe worse. It's soft. Another con is it's very soft. It's hard to sand and polish because you reactivate that clear no matter what you put on there, whether it's polish, wax, a little bit of water on your sandpaper. You just have to go very lightly with everything and rub it in really good and then rub it off really good. Let everything dry up to a haze, polish it off. But you can do it. It can be done. And I realize there's going to be people that have the limitation where they have no choice but to go with the water-based. Now with practice, you could probably get better and perfect this a little bit better. I must say I'm a little bit more skilled and much more comfortable with the enamel. What do you think? Comment below. Okay, time for my final thoughts. And I know this video got a little bit long, but I wanted to include as much detail as I possibly can. It really did work, folks. I probably sound pretty negative on it. Be honest, I'm going to stick with my enamels in 2K because I really love that show car finish. I think the water-based acrylic for me does have its place. I will use it on, I can use it on chassis or an interior. If I'm doing a patina job where I'm trying to look for that really rough, faded out paint looking, then I prefer the water-based acrylics because they're a little bit easier to knock down to reveal the surface below it. So what is a con on the paint for a show car finish is a pro if you're trying to go for patina finish. Now I've sprayed many cars in my garage for real in my life. I've never been a professional. I'm what you call a jack of all trades and a master of none. But I have turned out some pretty awesome paint jobs. And even on the models, I'm comfortable with the airbrush and got up to speed really quick. But I do want to put some shout outs and thank yous out there. First of all, there is Stumpy Grumps let's see, let me get that right. Stumpy Grump's Scale Speed Shop. And I'll have a link in the description for his channel. But he has perfected the water-based acrylics. So if you want to learn more about that and see his work, I really advise you to go check out his channel. And then for the enamels, the guru, the guy who really zoned it in for me to get my perfect paint jobs, is Kreg at Kreg's Corner. And I'll have a link for him in the description here. He is an incredible builder as well, and he's mastered the MCW enamels. I feel I have to now, but you know, thanks to Kreg, because he kind of got me on the right path, and thanks to Stumpy Grump, I'm sorry I don't know your first name, but you know, he kind of helped me get a grasp of the water-based acrylic. So as usual, if you like my content, please subscribe. It costs absolutely nothing. Like, comment below, and till the next time, folks, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it.